the where was I? All right, so Adam and Eve. Like, do you consider that story to be some sort of description of like God giving consciousness or sentience,
No.
in a sense to like a single early pair of early humans? Like, right. So what does it like mean for you?
So it's as I was sort of talking about, it's the first time God made a covenant with humans. It's the first priestly covenant sort of set up. This is the first time God has sort of made a sacred space, the garden. This is where humans are going to meet with him. So he makes sort of this first covenant. And I can argue that from Genesis 1. So notice in Genesis 1, it talks about humanity in general terms, like, humanity shall be the image of God. He shall subdue the earth and rule over creation. Then in Genesis 2:4, we see something called a Toledoth formula. It's these are the generations of. That
Hmm.
shows up in Genesis about 11 times, I believe. Anytime that Toledoth formula shows up, it always introduces what comes after the person that's mentioned. So it's almost like a chapter marker in a lot of ways. So that means Adam and Eve come after humanity has been given the image of God. So humanity generally is given the image of God. Then chapter 2, God hones it on a specific region, this land of Eden, Persian Gulf, creates a sacred space there, the garden, and then he elects two humans to be the first priest and priestess of creation. Then they fall in their exile, of course. But generally, that's what it is. Humanity is sort of elected to be the image of God, all humanity, wherever they are. Then he hones it on a sacred space. So this is not about the creation of the first man, in my view.
Hmm.
This is about God setting up covenant with the first priest. And this is why we see in the New Testament, Adam is the priest who failed, compared with Christ, the priest who succeeded.
Okay. So then, when beyond that, then when we're talking about like there's the flood, I think definitely there's like an outrageous amount of historical evidence that there was a big monstrous rise in sea levels, floods, etc. So that I don't have any issue with historically. And then you sort of go back like further and they talk about like that there were giants in this time and
There were no, it
yeah,
doesn't say. No, this is actually a thing of mine that bothers me that Christians do. The Bible never says giants existed.
okay,
Never once. This is a misunderstanding of a lot of passages.
okay,
So in Genesis 6, it says the Nephilim were in the land. We don't know what Nephilim really means. It might likely to derive from the word like Nephal, to fall.
okay,
So it could be calling them the fallen ones. It never actually says they're giants. The reason why we get that is because in Numbers 13, the spies of Israel go into the land of Canaan. They come out, and the corrupt spies say, "We saw the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers before them." So then we go, oh, Nephilim must refer to these giant type creatures. Problem is they're probably doing hyperbole, and the book of Numbers, chapter 13, directly tells us what they gave is a bad report. It's not a trustworthy report. So that actually comes from a report that we're not even supposed to trust. Even in Deuteronomy, when they do a survey of the land of Canaan, they don't mention Nephilim because they weren't there. This is the 10 corrupt spies lied. The only other two places that might mention giants are it says Og, who is king and east of the Jordan River. I forget the exact name of his kingdom. But it says he had a bed that was like 13 feet. But that doesn't mean that he literally was 13 feet any more reason than having a California king size bed today doesn't mean you're morbidly obese. It just shows your wealth. So Og having a big bed doesn't mean he was literally had to be 13 feet. The only place, of course, Goliath. And if you read in the Masoretic text, it says he was 9.5 feet. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Septuagint, it says he was 6.5 feet. So that's not inhumane.
hmm.
I mean, it's not inhuman. He
No,
could very well have just been a very tall human. So there's no sort of like these angelic hybrid like creatures that are not human in the Bible that are giants. That's something we get from later commentaries trying to read that back onto the biblical text.
okay. So then something I know is definitely in there is the description of people who are incredibly old, like hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Ah,
How real do
no,
you
they're not.
think that is? Like, so then, right,
No,
okay,
it's
so
not
what
real.
does that mean? Like, so right, so then when they're describing this and they're like, oh, was it like, they're like 800 years old or 600 years old? So what do you like interpret that to mean?
Well, there's a lot of things to say about that. For anyone who's interested, I did a video as part of my Genesis 1 to 11 series. So I did a series on Genesis 1 to 11, and I did one or two videos on every chapter. So I just go through Genesis 1, 2, 3, and then I did one entirely on Genesis 5. And basically the whole video is about discussing the cultural context of these long ages. So one thing we need to know is that in ancient cultures, they often sort of did this kind of thing. They would give themselves high ages. We see this in the Sumerian king list to show honor. Sargon II, for example, of Assyria said, I built the circumference of the city wall, 16,283 cubits, the number of my name. So there's a specific number, 16,283, assigned to his name. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob are sort of given these ideal numbers. Abraham's 175, Isaac is 180, Jacob is 147. And then after Jacob has his name changed to Israel, the rest of his life is 64 years. But as I show this in my video, it's hard for me to explain here, but those are actually mathematical formulas that add up to get specific. Each age gets a formula that equates to 17 on purpose. They're doing this on purpose to show symbolic perfection and to give praise to the ancestors. Specifically with the ages of Genesis 5, scholars have noted that these are weird numbers. They don't end like they're supposed to. So they all end in like a 5, a 2, a 0, or like a 7, I think at like one point. And so, yeah, 0, 2, 5, 7, or 9. Kenton Sparks notes the possibility of that occurring for this number of people would have been 0.000000006% possible. So these are not literal ages. And if we compare this, so Lloyd Bailey actually did a comparison. He compared these ages with the reigns of kings of Judah and Israel that we see later in Chronicles and the books of Kings. We don't see the same thing. In Chronicles, we see that every king had a reign that ended in one of the numbers of 0 through 9. So, but in Genesis 5, it only either ends in a 2, 5, 7, or 9. This is a clue telling us these are symbolic ages. They're giving them praise to the ancestors to calculate, to give like these symbolic numbers. And the main thing I think what is going on here is if you start with Adam, you take his age, you take Seth's age, Enosh's age, Canaan's age, you do that all the way to Moses, you actually get a symbolic number. I believe it's, I talk about it in the video, but I believe it is like 16th, it's 12,600.
Okay.
And that's important because you see another version of that in Revelation. You see 1,260 used in Revelation as a symbolic number. So that was an important number for the Jews to get to that exact amount, just multiplied by a 10 sometimes. So these are symbolic numbers. They're not meant to be taken literal.
Okay. So what do the numbers symbolize?
Depends. See, sometimes we're not entirely sure because a lot of the cultural context is lost to us. There are some things that we just, sort of have lost from the ancient world. One thing I think it symbolizes is, again, it's getting that symbolic number between Adam and Moses. And, as you go further back, you're more likely to have longer ages. And the longer the age, the more praise you may want to give to the ancestor. And it sort of counts down. And the older, of course, you want to give more praise as well at times because, that goes even further back. That's a really great ancestor. You may decrease some, perhaps maybe for like Jared, for example, because maybe from other texts he wasn't as good as maybe perhaps Methuselah, who came later. But you're generally trying to make these ideal formulas that you want to use to sort of teach the symbolic message. And I go into this in a lot of detail in my video on Genesis 5.
Okay, I'm definitely going to check that out. I'll put those videos in the description below as well for people who are listening. So what it sounds like you're saying is there's a secret code hidden in the Bible.
Kind of, but I mean, it's not like it's not like a prediction of the future. It's just something that would have meant to the ancient authors that would have been interesting.
So you don't buy any of the Bible code stuff?
No, God, no.
Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.